Diane Mercer paid for the baby shower. She folded every napkin, stirred every sauce, smiled through every slight. Then she read the text not meant for her eyes. Don't let her near the baby again. She's too much like your mom used to be. By morning, Diane Mercer had already filed her first affidavit. She didn't raise her voice. She raised her standard of proof, and when they tried to erase her with silence, she answered with court orders. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The baby shower ended the way most polite betrayals do, with too much sugar and not enough warmth. Diane stood in the doorway of her own kitchen, watching Emily's friends gather their gift bags and compliments, all lace and politeness and filtered laughter. She caught the faint scent of rose-scented hand lotion as someone hugged her with one arm and scrolled with the other. The rented balloon arch groaned as the front door opened again. Outside, the late Oregon sun cast a warm gold across her hedges, but it couldn't reach the cold behind her ribs. She had footed the bill for everything, from the organic catering to the Instagram-worthy backdrop, with Sweet Baby Mercer, spelled out in acrylic cursive. Emily had nodded politely when the final gift was opened. Barely glancing at the handmade quilt Diane had spent 6 weeks stitching during long, quiet nights. Diane picked up paper plates with 2 fingers, careful not to smear the leftover frosting, and dumped them into a compostable bag. She moved without speaking, without sighing, just moved. She'd learned long ago that dignity made no noise. Her phone buzzed from the counter. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, expecting maybe a thank you, a stray message from one of Emily's friends, or possibly a text from Paige checking in. Instead, she saw the preview, Emily Caldwell Mercer, don't let her near the baby again. She's too much like your mom used to be. For a moment, Diane thought she'd misread it. She tapped the screen. Beneath Emily's name, the group thread opened up in soft gray and blue bubbles. Luke Mercer. She stared. No other names on the thread. Just the 2 of them. And her. Someone had accidentally looped her in, or maybe Emily had hit the wrong D. She could see her own contact listed, silent and awkward like a forgotten ghost at the edge of a dinner table. She didn't reply. She didn't blink. Instead, she tapped and held the message, hit save to files, and named the screenshot simply, Text 1. Outside, a baby blue balloon caught in the hydrangea bush and burst with a faint pop. Her heart didn't race. It steadied, slowed. She walked to the dining room where the last of the guests filtered out. Emily kissed the baby bump like it was a stage cue and waved at someone's husband holding a stroller. Diane stood behind them in the reflection of the mirror above the buffet table, shoulders straight, hands quiet at her sides. Thanks again for everything, Diane, Emily said over her shoulder. It really turned out cute. Cute. Not meaningful. Not generous. Not personal. You're welcome, Diane said. Her voice smooth as polished wood. She meant it too. It was a goodbye, and she knew it. Later that night, after the last dish had been washed and her fingertips smelled faintly of lemon soap, Diane sat at her desk beneath a photo of her late husband, Roger, fishing with Luke when he was 8. That boy had once looked at her like she was a lighthouse. Now he blinked cartoon emojis in response to his wife's cruelty. She opened her laptop. The desktop wallpaper was a photo of Sarah's ultrasound, one Emily had once forwarded by accident, but Diane had saved anyway. She opened a new folder and renamed it 3 times before settling. Custody access. Mercer ver Mercer. She didn't add anything else yet. Not the emails. Not the calendar cancellations, not the social invitations rescinded at the last minute, not the Sunday mornings when she sat dressed and ready with a new book for the baby, only to receive a vague last-minute excuse. Not yet. She minimized the window. The room was quiet. The sound of the fridge ticking on reminded her of a school bell, marking the end of recess. In the stillness, Diane turned off the light and whispered aloud, not to herself, not even to Roger, but to the future. Okay. The baby cooed in the corner while Diane stood 10 feet away, holding a tray of fresh scones no one asked for. Emily had arrived precisely at 10 a.m., with Sarah bundled in an organic cotton sling and a bright camera-ready smile. Luke followed 2 steps behind, already looking at his watch. The air in the living room smelled faintly of cinnamon and resentment. "Let's just set her down here," Emily said, lowering Sarah into the bassinet. Diane had purchased herself, now permanently labeled, too soft and not safe for naps longer than 20 minutes. Diane kept her tone even. "She looks bigger already." Emily didn't look up. "We're trying a new formula. Goat milk based. It's easier on her gut." Diane nodded, even though no one had asked her opinion. She placed the tray on the coffee table, arranging a small plate beside it like she always did, habit learned from years of staff meetings and PTA diplomacy. She poured coffee with practiced grace, her knuckles brushing the warm ceramic of Emily's favorite mug. Luke took his cup without a word. Emily accepted hers with a smile that didn't reach her cheeks. "I'll just sit here," Diane offered, motioning to the armchair near the window, not too close to the bassinet. "Let me know if she needs anything." Emily looked up then. Her tone was feather-light, but the blade was visible underneath. "Actually, could you not hold her today? I think your hands were shaking last time." It stressed her out. The silence that followed was weightless and brutal. Diane didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap, like she was waiting for a eulogy to begin. "I see," she said finally. Luke cleared his throat and kept his eyes on the hardwood floor. "It's just easier not to push Emily right now. Things are delicate." "Delicate," Diane repeated, tasting the word like something overcooked. They sipped their coffee. Emily posted a picture of the bassinet, carefully cropped to exclude Diane entirely. The photo went up with the caption, "Grateful for family time." Even as Diane sat 3 feet away, excluded like background wallpaper in her own house. 20 minutes later, Paige arrived through the back door with a tray of lemon bars and a look that could curdle milk. She saw the arrangement in a single glance. Diane perched on the sidelines, Emily glowing in self-importance, and Luke looked like a man who'd misplaced his backbone and hadn't bothered to look for it. "Morning," Paige said, setting the tray down hard enough to jostle the table. "Smells like performance in here." Emily gave her a tight-lipped smile. "We were just about to head out." Diane stood. "Already?" "Yeah, Sarah gets overstimulated after a while." Emily turned back to the bassinet. "Plus nap windows are tight. We're on a schedule." Diane walked them out, the screen door slapping shut behind Luke's silence. Emily didn't say thank you. Back in the living room, Paige sat beside her without speaking. She picked up a lemon bar, broke it in half, and handed the bigger piece to Diane. "You okay?" she asked. "Not gently." "I hosted," Diane said. "I smiled. I didn't touch the baby, and I was still too much." Paige waited. After a moment, Diane looked up. Her voice was quieter now, but not frail. "Have I done something wrong?" From across the room, Emily's earlier words echoed like a slap on polished glass. "It's not personal. Just boundaries." Paige exhaled, slow and controlled. That woman weaponized the word boundaries the same way some folks weaponize religion. Diane didn't respond. She didn't need to. Instead, she stood, walked into her office, and opened the drawer she hadn't touched in 2 years. Inside was an old laptop, still tagged with her school district barcode. She booted it up. The screen flickered, then steadied, her inbox blinking to life. She typed in her password and clicked search. Name after name populated the screen: former students, colleagues, parents who'd sent thank you notes for recommendations, mentorship, and second chances. She clicked select all. The first missed visit felt like a mix-up. The second felt like a message. Diane noticed it one quiet Monday evening as she cross-checked her calendar. The shared family Google schedule, once dotted with tentative lunches, baby milestones, and Sunday brunches, now showed nothing. Her usual Wednesday visit block had simply vanished. She refreshed the screen twice, 3 times, nothing. She opened her messages. The last one she'd sent was a simple thumbs up to a picture of Sarah in a yellow knit hat. No one had replied. She scrolled higher. Her recent texts were a parade of ghosted confirmations. Still on for tomorrow. Let me know if I should bring anything. Seen. Not answered. And then even those stopped coming. The photos vanished first. Sarah's first gurgling laugh, the soft pout in her sleep, her squinty-eyed half-smile, all gone from the group thread. Diane checked Emily's social media and found carefully curated photos of stroller walks and mommy and me yoga. No tags, no grandparents, just filtered happiness and vague captions like protecting our peace. Paige noticed too. She's airbrushing you out of their life, she muttered over coffee, staring at the phone screen like it might spit fire. Diane didn't respond. She was too busy tracing the pattern, the excuses, the silence. But it was her neighbor Janice who delivered the final piece, leaning over the white picket fence, with that hesitant, gossipy tone that always meant trouble. Hey Diane? I probably shouldn't say anything, but I overheard Emily at the preschool fundraiser. She called you emotionally erratic, said it was a grief thing, that you weren't stable enough to be around the baby. Diane blinked once, like she'd swallowed something sharp. That night she dug out the manila folder she'd labeled just in case nearly 2 years ago, back when Luke first started saying things like she's just strong-willed and don't take it personally, Mom. She opened her laptop and searched family law. Ashland. The top name came up bold, in serif font and plain confidence. Ruth Delaney, Esquire. The next morning, Diane sat across from Ruth's mahogany desk in a light gray sweater, her posture perfect. The office smelled like sage and printer ink. Ruth wore square glasses and a dark green pantsuit. No jewelry except for a gold pen. She clicked twice before speaking. You brought receipts, Ruth said, flipping through the printed screenshots and texts. Good. I don't want to fight, Diane said. I just want to be in my granddaughter's life. Ruth didn't blink. They're pushing you out slowly. It starts with rescheduled visits. Then silence. Then they tell the baby when she's old enough that you chose distance. Diane folded her hands in her lap. That's not what happened. I know, Ruth said. But it will be. Unless we stop it now. Diane glanced out the window, where a dog barked at nothing, and the wind tossed dried leaves across the sidewalk. What are my options? In Oregon, grandparents can petition for visitation if it's in the best interest of the child, but you need to prove a significant ongoing relationship and a pattern of deliberate exclusion. Ruth tapped the file, which you've documented, carefully. Diane's lips tightened. Then I'd like to move forward. Ruth slid a packet across the desk. We'll file for court-ordered visitation. If needed, we escalate to partial custody. Diane hesitated for a breath, not because she was unsure, but because she wanted the weight of the moment to land. Then she signed. Ruth collected the papers, efficient as a surgeon, then paused, fingers still on the last sheet. One more thing. I ran a preliminary check on Sarah's insurance record. Medical privacy's a fortress, but clerical records, sloppier. She turned her laptop toward Diane. On the screen was a digital enrollment form, dated just after Sarah's birth. The listed next of kin, Diane Mercer. Estranged maternal figure. Estranged, Diane whispered, as if saying it too loud might make it real. Emily's laying groundwork, Ruth said quietly, to erase you from their narrative. One line at a time. The bottle warmed slowly in Diane's hand, the plastic hissing faintly as steam rose from the sunlit patio table. Sarah stirred in her stroller beside her, small fists flexing, mouth beginning to pucker in that unmistakable pre-cry motion. Diane checked the label, confirmed the temperature on the inside of her wrist, just the way she used to show new mothers in her kindergarten orientation packets. Her fingers moved with muscle memory. 1,000 babies ago. She smiled softly, and unscrewed the cap. Then Emily's voice sliced through the summer air. Don't, just don't. You'll do it wrong. The bottle froze mid-air. Diane turned her head slowly. Emily stood near the grill with her sunglasses perched like a visor, one hand wrapped around a craft cider, the other casually gesturing as if she hadn't just cut the air in half. "Excuse me?" Diane asked, tone light controlled. Emily didn't blink. "The nipple's the wrong flow. And I don't like anyone else feeding her. It messes with our bonding." Diane's smile returned, but it was thin now, like a line drawn in chalk before a storm. She placed the bottle gently on the picnic table beside the unopened diaper bag. "Of course," she said evenly. "Your child." Luke kept his eyes on the burgers. Paige, standing 2 steps behind Diane, bit the inside of her cheek and muttered, "Oh, for the love." Diane didn't flinch. She leaned forward, adjusted the sun hat over Sarah's eyes, and stepped back into the house, her sandals clicking against the flagstone. Inside, the hum of the AC felt almost intimate. The noise outside dulled behind the sliding glass door. She crossed the living room, intending only to grab napkins, something safe, something neutral. But Emily's purse was open on the hallway console. It wasn't rummaging. Diane never touched the bag, but it lay gaping, like a careless secret, a manila envelope poking out. 2 words stamped across it in block red font made her breath hitch. "Confidential, Family Court, Case No. 0872. Diane glanced toward the window. Laughter floated through the screen. No one was coming. She pulled out her phone, silent, steady, and took 3 fast photos of the visible documents: custody motion, court seal, a brief note clipped to the front, final report, maternal custody approved with psychological provisions. She tucked everything back exactly as she found it. Later, she stood beside Paige under the porch awning as the grill hissed behind them. Sarah slept now, face turned toward Diane's chest from across the yard. The bottle remained untouched on the table. Paige lit a cigarette she'd quit 5 years ago and didn't inhale. "You good?" Diane's voice was almost a whisper. "She's done this before." Paige blinked. "What do you mean?" Diane didn't answer directly. She just looked at Sarah, then at Emily, who was posing for a staged photo with Luke, one hand resting carefully on his chest, like it was a brand. "She's done this before," Diane repeated, quieter now. Back home, she uploaded the photos to her encrypted folder, Custody Access, Mercer v. Mercer, and labeled them Custody History, Emily C. She made tea, but didn't drink it, just held the mug in both hands, letting the steam warm the same fingers that hadn't been trusted to hold a bottle. In her mind, she began to assemble the case, not just legally, but emotionally. Patterns of exclusion, emotional discrediting, public manipulation, the child not as a person, but as a shield, a tool. It had taken shape so gradually, it might have seemed organic to anyone else, not to Diane. Later that night, Paige called. Her voice was low but firm. If she didn't want war, Paige said, she shouldn't have drafted the map. Diane stared out the window, where the garden light caught the edge of Sarah's old stroller, now folded neatly beside her door. Unused. Waiting. The nursery door had been closed when Diane arrived for what would become her final unscheduled visit. Locked, actually. She heard the click from the hallway. Soft, almost embarrassed. Like Emily wanted to make sure Diane heard it. "There's a lot of stimulation in here," Emily had said through the door, her voice syrupy sweet, trying to get her down for a nap. Diane stood in the hallway for 7 minutes, listening to nothing but the white noise machine behind a painted wooden door. The silence wasn't passive, it was strategic. That night, she printed the photos, the texts, the visitation cancellations, the digital audit of deleted baby photos, the insurance inconsistencies, and quietly, the custody documents from Emily's own childhood court case. She laid them out across her dining table, like a mosaic of red flags. Then she called Ruth. "This isn't just visitation anymore," Diane said calmly. "They're creating psychological distance. That's a form of developmental neglect. You said if it escalated." Ruth cut her off. "I'll prepare the custody motion." By the end of the week, the petition was filed under Oregon Revised Statute 109.119, not just for grandparent visitation rights, but partial custody on the grounds of proven parental obstruction and risk of early attachment disruption. The morning the summons was served, Emily was mid-live stream, pitching eco-friendly diapers from her backyard patio. She'd balanced Sarah on her hip, holding a silicone teether, and gesturing toward the ring light, with the ease of someone who'd practiced the script 20 times. Diane didn't watch live, but Paige did. She got it at minute 8. Paige reported, breathless over speakerphone. Guy walked right into frame. She looked like she'd been hit with a stun gun. The live stream cut instantly. Comments flooded in, what happened? Is that her husband's mom suing her? AMG. Drama. Diane didn't check the backlash. She didn't care. She was in her office, organizing binders, color-coding evidence tabs. The printer hummed behind her. The air smelled of ink, citrus cleaner and something else readiness. Luke called that evening, voice tight and boiling just below the surface. You went nuclear. No, Diane said, not missing a beat. I went legal. There was a long silence on the line. She could hear him breathing, could hear the moment he realized this wasn't a threat, it was a beginning. I told you it didn't have to get this far. She closed a folder softly. It got this far the moment your wife locked a door between me and my granddaughter. He didn't respond. The call ended. By morning, Diane had been wiped from every digital trace of Emily's life. Instagram, Facebook, even a group Pinterest board for Sarah's first birthday. She became a ghost in real time. But ghosts don't sign affidavits. Ruth issued a statement to the local family court on Diane's behalf. This petition is not motivated by control nor retaliation. It is rooted in consistent exclusion, unjustified emotional isolation, and the right of a child to maintain meaningful contact with a stable grandparent. The statement was crisp, sharp. It made local headlines in small corners of Ashland, where everyone knew everyone, and reputations whispered faster than wildfire. Paige walked into Diane's kitchen the next afternoon, tossing her purse on the bench with the force of a dropped gauntlet. You're officially that woman now, she said. The one who sues her own daughter-in-law. Diane stirred her tea, eyes steady. Good. Regret it yet? No, Diane said. Without hesitation, she wanted to control access. I offered relationship. She chose control. They sat for a while in silence, the ice cubes melting into Paige's glass like slow punctuation. Later that week, Ruth called with scheduling confirmation. Mediation is set for 6 weeks from today, she said. You'll get formal visitation review and psychological evaluation prep next. Diane took a breath, calm and rooted. Then Ruth added casually, but deliberately, also the petition for partial custody is accepted for hearing. That part will not be private. That part will be on public record. Diane didn't smile, but she did reach for her calendar. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and nerves. Diane adjusted her blouse sleeve once, then folded her hands on the table in front of her. Her posture was a masterclass in poise. No bounce of the leg. No rustle of paper, no nervous glance. Just stillness. She'd spent a lifetime controlling rooms of screaming children. This one didn't scare her. Emily's attorney stood from his seat with the theatrical stiffness of a man who liked the sound of his own cross-examinations. We'd like to raise concerns regarding the petitioner's emotional stability, he began, flipping to the highlighted pages of a printout that Diane already knew by heart. Specifically regarding the time period following the death of her husband Roger Mercer, 2 years ago. Diane heard Paige inhale sharply behind her. She didn't turn. The attorney went on. Records indicate a 3-month bereavement, withdrawal from her social circles, and a temporary prescription for antidepressants. These point to an unstable emotional foundation, one that may not support consistent caregiving of an infant. Ruth didn't even blink. Are you finished reciting Google symptoms, or should we pause for a WebMD citation? The judge raised an eyebrow. Miss Delaney. Your Honor, the defense is cherry-picking grief as pathology. Fortunately, my client anticipated this line of attack. She opened a folder and slid forward a stapled document, short, clinical, and signed by 3 licensed professionals. Therapy logs, psychiatric clearance, and an ongoing wellness plan. My client sought help, processed her grief, and continues healthy maintenance. Not only is she stable, she's model stable. The attorney looked briefly unsettled but recovered fast. Still, the emotional toll, Ruth cut in, louder this time, is what any responsible adult would carry after 34 years of marriage. Diane remained silent. She didn't fidget. She let the weight of her stillness do the speaking. Ruth then opened another folder, thicker this time, and placed it with a satisfying thump. 17 letters, she said, from former students, co-workers, community members, and parents, each testifying to my client's integrity, emotional intelligence, and consistent caregiving history. Many of them go back decades. She pulled out 3 and handed them to the judge, one from a former student who credited Diane with saving her from a toxic home, another from a fellow teacher who trusted Diane with her own child in times of crisis, and one from the current school board chair, citing Diane's measured judgment in emotionally heightened scenarios. The judge skimmed each. Diane caught the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, something more thoughtful. From outside the window came the distant click of a phone camera shutter. Moments later, an intern entered the courtroom and passed a phone to the defense attorney, whispering something under her breath. The attorney's lips tightened. Emily, it turned out, had stepped outside during recess. She'd staged herself on the courthouse steps, holding Sarah to her chest, eyes red and puffy, recording a soft-voiced video between rehearsed tears. I never thought my own child would be used like this, by someone who should be family. But the tears weren't real. The panic was performative. And by the time the story posted, commenters were already fact-checking her timeline. Ruth didn't mention it aloud. She didn't need to. The courtroom buzzed with the aftershock. Diane leaned back in her chair, and finally looked at Emily. She didn't speak. She didn't scowl. She simply held her gaze, long enough to make it clear she saw everything, and longer still to remind her that truth doesn't need to shout. From the bench, the judge tapped his pen twice. Let the record show the petitioner has met every requirement for stable caregiving potential. Paige leaned forward behind Diane, voice low as thunderclouds. They came in heels, she said. You came in armor. Ruth, straightening her jacket, turned toward the bench. Your Honor, we now submit a motion to unseal Miss Emily Caldwell Mercer's psychological records from her 2017 custody trial in California. A pause. A ripple. Even the clerk looked up from his keyboard. Emily adjusted the collar of her blouse, like it might protect her from the truth. She sat stiff-backed on the witness stand, her expression arranged in careful distress, the kind that played well on screens and sympathies. Her fingers twisted the edge of a tissue she hadn't used yet. Behind her, the courtroom walls seemed to lean in. I felt unsafe, she began, her voice trembling just enough to register. Diane, Mrs. Mercer, once fed Sarah without my permission. It wasn't even the right formula. I told her not to. She disregarded me. She glanced at the judge, then the gallery. Her voice found more strength. She has a pattern of overstepping. Sarah cries when she's near her. I think she makes the baby anxious. Diane didn't move. Not a blink, not a twitch. But beside her, Ruth flipped open a file with all the theatrical subtlety of a thunderclap. She stood. Your Honor, if I may redirect with visual evidence. The judge gave a nod. Ruth turned the courtroom monitor to face the bench, clicking to a dated social media post. There, in soft light and hospital blues, was Diane holding Sarah hours after her birth. Sarah's head rested against her collarbone. Her eyes were closed, her body completely relaxed. In the caption posted months ago by Emily herself, the text read, "She already loves her Nana," gasps, rippled like raindrops across the courtroom. Ruth tapped the next image. Another post, same day. This time Sarah latched onto Diane's pinky, her little hand barely curling around it. Caption, "Unreal bond already. 3 generations strong." Ruth turned to the bench. These were public. The defense has no objection, but they directly contradict the claim that the baby reacts negatively to the petitioner. Emily's face hardened, lips thinning to a single hyphen. Her hand crushed the tissue now. No tears came. Then Ruth turned slowly. Mrs. Mercer, do you force interaction with your granddaughter? No, Diane said calmly. I've only been given brief windows to be around her. When they come, I show up. When they cancel, I wait. Our Russell, Luke was called next. He took the stand wearing a suit too new for him, creases stiff, collar too tight. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the mic. Mr. Mercer, Ruth began. Do you recall the event your wife described, where your mother allegedly fed your child against your instructions? Luke blinked. I remember a bottle. I don't know who warmed it. You were present, correct? I think so. I guess, he paused, the air congealing around his uncertainty. I don't remember all the details. A long beat. Ruth let the silence fill the room like water in a sinking ship. Luke looked at Diane, just for a second, then down at his shoes. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Mercer, have you ever heard your wife say your mother was unstable? Luke hesitated. She's said things during arguments. I wouldn't say unstable. Has Emily ever prevented visits between your mother and your daughter? Luke swallowed. She has preferences. I try not to intervene. Now it was the judge's turn to let silence speak. He looked toward Emily, his eyes tired but sharp. Mrs. Mercer, he said evenly, have you at any point used your child as a means to punish your mother-in-law? Emily opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The judge waited. Still nothing. She blinked, once, twice, but the silence kept bleeding. Her jaw clenched. Her fingers curled into her skirt. Ruth didn't look at her. Neither did Diane. Instead, Diane kept her eyes trained on the bench, on the seat of consequence, not chaos. That had always been her difference. Emily weaponized emotion. Diane documented truth. The judge finally broke the silence. This case has escalated beyond typical visitation. I'm ordering an independent child psychologist to evaluate both households. Recommendations will guide my final ruling. Emily flinched. Luke closed his eyes. Only Diane remained still, like she'd expected this, like she'd waited for it. The first envelope arrived on a Wednesday morning, tucked between a gardening catalog and a credit card offer. The handwriting was neat, upright, and unmistakably practiced in cursive. Diane slid it open at the kitchen counter, still in her robe, and read the opening line twice. To whom it may concern, I would trust Diane Mercer with my children in a thunderstorm, an emergency, or the middle of the night. I did more than once. By Friday there were 34. Letters from former teachers she'd supervised, parents who remembered her staying late after school with forgotten kids, a woman from church who recounted the time Diane delivered soup to her door every day for 2 weeks after her surgery. Some were typed, others handwritten, all of them unwavering. She filed them in a binder labeled Character Third Party and didn't mention a word of it to anyone, not even Paige. She didn't need to boast. She just needed the judge to see. 2 days later, the court-appointed child psychologist rang Diane's doorbell at exactly 10 a.m. She wore gray flats, a beige cardigan, and a look of practiced neutrality. Diane had brewed the coffee already. Dark roast, no sugar, set beside a glass carafe of water and 2 lemon cookies she hadn't planned to offer but placed anyway. The evaluator politely declined both. Diane gave her a quiet tour. The guest room already fitted with a crib, a soft reading nook with 3 picture books stacked and bookmarked, a playmat that still had its tags attached. Everything was clean but not performative. There were signs of real life, a dish in the sink, a cardigan on the banister, a lavender plant wilting slightly on the sill. Do you have a routine in mind if visitation is granted? The evaluator asked, making notes. I do, Diane replied. Reading first, then play. I don't believe in overstimulation. Children need a calm rhythm. The evaluator nodded. She's 2 months old. I know, Diane said. But rhythm starts early. The evaluator smiled, just faintly. She stayed 47 minutes. That same afternoon, Emily went live on Instagram, her eyeliner smudged just enough to look like tears. The caption read, "Sometimes the people who smile in your face are the ones trying to tear your family apart. Protect your peace. Mom life." She held Sarah in her lap and looked directly into the camera. "They say it's about love. But love doesn't serve court papers. Love doesn't weaponize biology." The comments came fast, and not the way she expected. "Didn't you say your mom did this exact thing? Why do you keep posting your baby during a legal dispute? Thought you said you didn't want drama." The shift was subtle but irreversible. Empathy drained from the digital room. By the time Diane saw the clip, Paige had already texted a screenshot. "Paige, she lit her own house on fire and wants credit for the smoke alarm." Later that week, Paige herself submitted an affidavit. "I've known Diane Mercer since we were 26 years old. We've disagreed, we've argued, we've fought, but she has never once acted out of anything but principle and love. If anything, she's too patient. I told her to fight earlier. She waited. She gave Emily room to choose differently. She didn't." Ruth read it, folded it neatly, and placed it in the evidence binder. "We don't need outrage," she murmured. "We need outcome." Court resumed that Thursday in a smaller hearing room, without the crowd or the cameras. The judge, same one who'd heard the earlier statements, flipped slowly through the evaluator's early notes. He looked up at Diane. "Your home is safe. Your documentation is thorough. Your emotional presentation remains calm and consistent." He turned to Emily. "Miss Caldwell Mercer, your social media presence is concerning. This is not a public relations matter. It is a custody petition involving a newborn." Emily stared, tight-lipped. She said nothing. Then the judge leaned forward. "Temporary supervised visitation is granted twice a week, beginning Monday. Both households will be evaluated further before permanent arrangements are determined." Diane inhaled once. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply folded her hands, as if in prayer, only this time it was answered. The first supervised visit began with a clipboard and a stopwatch. The court-appointed observer stood in the corner of Diane's living room, pen poised, expression unreadable. Her presence made the space feel tighter, like the walls were listening. But Sarah, 8 weeks old and swaddled in pale pink, didn't notice anything except the woman whose arms she knew. Diane sat on the floor rug with a quilt folded beneath her knees, gently rocking Sarah against her shoulder. She hummed, not a lullaby, not anything practiced, just a low, steady melody she'd once used on Luke after night terrors and on kindergartners when their parents were late. Sarah let out a breathy coo. Then she smiled. Not gas, not reflex. A smile. The evaluator made a mark on her form. "Infant vocal engagement," she noted. "Eye contact sustained. No signs of distress." Diane didn't look up. She just pressed her cheek against Sarah's forehead and whispered, "Hi, little bird. There you are." In the next visit, Sarah reached for Diane when handed off. Her fingers curled into the neckline of Diane's blouse, and her tiny body went limp with trust. When the bottle was introduced, she drank calmly, gaze fixed on Diane's face. The third visit, she laughed. Loud, giddy, a hiccuped squeal. The evaluator recorded that one too. Expressive joy, spontaneous high comfort level in alternate caregiver environment. Diane never said much during the visits. She didn't perform. She didn't gloat. She simply showed up punctual, prepared and patient. She laid out the same 3 books, the same soft blanket, the same lavender-scented wipes. She hummed the same tune. She let the repetition wrap Sarah like armor. By the 4th visit, the observer didn't hover anymore. She just sat quietly at the table, occasionally glancing up to scribble something. Then came the Friday that Emily tried to cancel. At 7:42 a.m., Diane received a single-line message. "Sarah has a rash. Pediatrician says no visits this week." There was no photo, no medical note, just a screen grab of a calendar event labeled Dr. Mitchell Puntative. Diane called twice. No answer. She emailed Ruth. By noon, Ruth filed an emergency visitation enforcement request, and attached the last 6 missed calls. She added a note: ongoing interference without evidence. Undermines court order. The judge reviewed it within 2 hours. The visit went forward. Sarah arrived fussy, but not feverish, not rash-covered, just tired. Diane didn't react to the stunt. She took the baby gently and did what she always did: wrapped her in a soft cotton sling, sat by the window and read "Goodnight Moon" twice in a low voice while the wind pressed against the glass in rhythmic pulses. The evaluator stayed the entire session this time. At the end, she closed her notebook and looked at Diane squarely. "This bond," she said, "is real. It's established. And it's meaningful." In the next court session, she told the judge the same. Despite minimal contact, the infant demonstrates clear emotional safety in the petitioner's presence. Comfort behaviors, including smiling, reaching, and relaxed posture, occurred consistently. She flipped to a second page. Attempts to disrupt visitation were noted. Justifications were unsubstantiated. Additionally, it is my professional opinion that emotional access to the grandchild is being deliberately limited, not for safety, but as leverage. The courtroom shifted then. Even Luke blinked. Emily crossed her arms tighter and stared at the floor. Diane didn't move. Her spine straightened slowly, almost imperceptibly, like something deep beneath her had realigned. The judge leaned back, then forward, then back again. "Effective immediately," he said. "Visitation is elevated to unsupervised 3 times per week. Transfers to be facilitated directly by Mr. Mercer until further order." Emily flinched like the words had physical weight. Then came the twist. The evaluator cleared her throat. "One more note, Your Honor. My full report will include the following finding." She flipped to the final page. "Based on the pattern of behavior observed and recorded, it is this evaluator's opinion that Miss Emily Caldwell Mercer appears to weaponize the child to manage adult conflict. Further psychological review is recommended." Gasps. Audible. Ruth didn't smile. Diane didn't gloat. They just let it hang. The invitation came through a group text she wasn't supposed to still be in. Little Mozart Sprouts. First session. 9:30 sharp. Parents lacks grandparents welcome. Diane stared at it for a long moment, then checked the sender. It wasn't Emily. It was Luke. She responded with a single word: "Thank you." That Saturday she arrived early, 9:10. She parked in the back lot of the Ashland Community Arts Center and sat in her car for 6 minutes, gathering herself. The air smelled faintly of pine from the nearby trail. Her palms rested steady on the steering wheel. When she finally stepped inside, the room was bright with sunlight, and the soft clang of toddlers knocking rhythm sticks against the floor. Sarah was already there, cradled by a young instructor while the rest of the babies thumped on drums and shook maracas like miniature revolutionaries. Diane stepped forward, her presence calm but unmissable. Sarah's head turned. Then, faster than anyone expected, she stretched out her arms. The instructor hesitated, looked at Diane. Diane nodded and reached out. The weight of Sarah against her chest was familiar now, not heavy, anchoring. "I've got you, baby girl," she whispered, barely audible above the soft piano in the corner. The class had just started when the door burst open at 9:52. Emily swept in wearing sunglasses indoors and an outfit that looked more like a lifestyle brand launch than morning music time. Her heels clicked across the cork floor as she scanned the room. Her voice cut through the children's xylophone chaos like a whip. "Why wasn't I told she'd be here?" The room fell awkwardly quiet. The music instructor cleared her throat, suddenly unsure whether to sing or stop. Diane didn't move. Sarah had gone quiet again in her arms, thumb curled near her cheek. Luke, standing awkwardly near the door, stepped forward. "I sent the message. It's court-approved visitation." Emily turned on him. "This is not what we agreed on. She's hijacking my daughter's space." "No," Diane said softly. "But clearly I'm just showing up where I was invited. You're the one late to your own child's life." Emily looked like she might throw something. Instead, she turned sharply and walked out, heels stabbing the floor with every step. The door slammed behind her. Ruth filed the motion that same afternoon. Petitioner moves to modify the custody request to include increased co-care involvement, grounds continued obstruction, court defiance, and behavioral escalation by respondent in shared environments. Emily's attorney responded by email within 2 hours. This is unnecessary escalation. Let's not confuse rigidity with concern. But Diane had proof. She'd kept a detailed log, dozens of texts, unanswered pickup confirmations, canceled meetups, Luke's apologies, Emily's veiled barbs. She turned the phone screen to Ruth. One text stood out in particular. If she keeps showing up, I'll just say she stressed the baby again. Don't test me. Ruth exhaled slowly. They wanted full control, she murmured. You just wanted a rocking chair. In a private session the following week, Emily sat across from the court-mandated therapist and tried to make the rage sound like fear. She's manipulative, Emily said, eyes flashing. She thinks because she raised my husband, she owns my child. The therapist listened. She didn't interrupt. She just asked, is there a reason your own mother doesn't speak to you either? Emily blinked. The temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. She was toxic, she said flatly. I cut her off to protect myself. The therapist made a note, then asked, gently, are you sure you're not parenting from a place of that old wound? Not from Sarah, but toward Diane. Emily stared at her lap. Didn't answer. 3 days later, Ruth received a copy of the report. The language was clinical but decisive. Client demonstrates signs of unresolved generational trauma, specifically maternal conflict history. Emotional regulation under perceived threat is inconsistent. Parenting judgment, when triggered by extended family, may be impaired. Ruth slid the report across the table toward Diane and Paige. She's unraveling, Paige said quietly. No, Diane replied, her voice even. She's repeating. It was always the things they thought no one would see that said the most. Ruth slid the flash drive into the courtroom monitor like she was lighting a fuse. The air crackled, not literally, but emotionally. Everyone felt it. Even the clerk looked up from his notes. We've submitted a forensic recovery report, Your Honor, Ruth announced, adjusting her blazer with calm precision. It includes a sequence of deleted messages between the respondent and her sister, extracted with consent from backup storage during preliminary compliance checks. Emily's attorney began to rise. They're inadmissible. No, the judge interrupted. They're not. Sit down. Ruth clicked open the first file. On screen, white text bubbles floated against a dark blue background, a digital afterimage of the arrogance that had assumed deletion was erasure. Emily. She's starting her little grandma campaign again. Like this is a Hallmark movie, and she's some kind of martyr. Emily's sister. Just smile and ice her out. Narcissists feed on attention. Emily, I told Luke don't let her near the baby unsupervised. I don't care what the judge says. I'll make something up if I have to. Gasps. Audible this time. The courtroom stilled as if the walls themselves paused to listen. Emily's mouth opened, then closed. Her face flushed a shade deeper than embarrassment, something closer to rage cornered by consequence. Luke went pale. Ruth didn't flinch. She clicked through more. Emily. He's spineless. I'm the one protecting Sarah. If she ever gets unsupervised time, I swear I'll say she left the baby in the car or something. She doesn't get to win. Diane sat frozen. Not rigid, not shocked. Still, the kind of stillness that held history. The kind that knew battles were often won by waiting for your opponent to implode. The judge leaned forward, elbows on the bench. These were deleted, yes, Ruth confirmed, but backed up automatically to cloud storage and recovered by a digital forensics investigator with chain of custody documentation. Emily's attorney whispered something, but the damage had already settled like ash over the room. The judge turned to Emily, whose hands now shook visibly. Miss is Caldwell Mercer, he said slowly. Can you explain why you referred to making up allegations against the petitioner if court orders didn't go your way? Emily opened her mouth. I was venting. People say things when, Do you deny sending these? No? The word was small. Pathetic. Then the judge turned to Luke. He had his hands folded, white-knuckled in his lap, and he wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Mr. Mercer, the judge said, clear and direct, do you believe your mother poses any danger, emotional, physical, or otherwise, to your child? The question hung there. A full beat passed, then another. Luke looked at Diane. She didn't blink. She didn't beg with her eyes or plead with her posture. She simply sat with her dignity fully intact. Luke swallowed hard. His voice cracked once before it steadied. No, I don't believe she's a danger. Silence. And in that silence the temperature of the case changed. The judge tapped his pen once, then twice. I am now forced to reconsider this not as a family tension issue, but as a case of sustained obstruction and documented falsehoods. He turned to Diane, then back to his clerk. Effective immediately, the petitioner will be granted one overnight visit per week, pending final review. Transition begins Friday. I will issue a formal ruling on the remaining custody petition in 3 weeks. Emily gasped. Luke looked down. Diane, for the first time, allowed herself a slow breath out, a soft inhale back in, controlled but unmistakably steady. This wasn't a win. Not yet. But it was the door creaking open, and this time they couldn't lock it shut. The rumor came back to Diane through her pharmacist. She said, you're trying to steal her baby. The woman whispered across the counter, voice lowered behind the hum of the prescription printer. I didn't ask. Just thought you should know what's getting said. Diane smiled politely. She did not respond. But by the end of the week, 5 more people, 2 from church, 1 from the library book club, 1 from the community garden, and a cashier at the co-op, had echoed the same storyline. She's manipulating the court system. She's emotionally unstable and wants to be a replacement mom. She's lying to judges to get full custody. Diane didn't bother countering. She didn't chase down truths in public spaces. Instead, she forwarded screenshots and second-hand confirmations to Ruth, who filed a formal cease and desist against Emily under defamation and character damage targeted misinformation during an active family court proceeding. Ruth sent the letter via certified mail and email. The subject line read simply, unauthorized narrative dissemination. Mercer v. Mercer. Emily's attorney responded, with a half-hearted denial and an emoji. Diane didn't flinch, because while Emily kept spinning webs in private texts and cryptic social posts, Diane did what she'd always done. She showed up Tuesdays, Thursdays, and now Saturdays. She opened her front door with the same calm smile. Sarah would be bundled in a fleece jacket, cheeks pink from the morning air, arms already stretching when she spotted Diane on the porch. By the 3rd week of overnight visits, Sarah had stopped needing transition time. She arrived, looked around, and walked straight toward Diane with an outstretched hand and a lopsided grin. One afternoon, during golden hour, Diane sat with her on the porch swing, sunlight dappling through the slats, a worn stuffed bear tucked under Sarah's arm. Diane read slowly, voice low and soothing, as Sarah nestled in and turned the page herself with a sticky little finger. Paige, watching from the edge of the garden with a tray of lemon bars, lifted her phone and quietly snapped the moment. No filters, no hashtags, just love without agenda. Later, she handed Diane the photo. That, Paige said, is what truth looks like. Let them lie louder if they want. Your proof doesn't need volume. That same evening, Diane scrolled Emily's Instagram. One post stood out. The caption read, "They forget who carried her, who bled for her. No one will take what I birthed." There was no photo, just a black square with a line of flickering candle emojis underneath. The comment section was split. Some offered support. Others began asking questions. But the court gave her overnight visits. Why would they do that if she was dangerous? Didn't you say your mom tried this too? Why not just co-parent with the grandmother instead of fighting? Ruth called the next morning. She's getting reckless, she said, and violating boundaries that aren't just legal, they're strategic. Diane set down her tea. Let her. We're not playing for public sympathy. We're building permanent truth. Still, Ruth filed the next motion fast. Motion for gag order. Both parties, to limit public commentary, online or in person, about the custody proceedings, including implications of harm, manipulation, or court bias. The judge reviewed it within 48 hours. He didn't even call a hearing. The order came down, direct and unambiguous. All parties are prohibited from discussing the case on public or social platforms, either directly or through implication. Violations will result in sanctions, evidentiary penalties, or if repeated, modification of custody review terms. Diane read it, nodded. She hadn't said a word about the case in public since the day it began. Emily, however, could barely wait 24 hours. That night, she posted a slow pan of Sarah's crib, her own hand hovering above the sleeping baby, followed by a shot of Emily crying quietly in a mirror. Caption: "They keep saying it's not about control, but they're taking pieces of me one court order at a time." The judge saw it the next morning. So did Ruth, so did Diane, though she said nothing. But the system she once feared would never protect her had finally started listening. The courtroom was full, but quiet. The final custody hearing began on a Tuesday morning beneath gray Oregon skies, the kind that threatened rain but never quite delivered. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and the smell of old paper and floor polish lingered. But the weight in the room had nothing to do with weather or atmosphere. It was Judgment Day. Diane sat straight-backed beside Ruth, wearing navy wool and pearl studs. Her folder sat closed before her, because she didn't need to flip through evidence anymore. Everything that mattered had already been lived. Across the aisle, Emily wore pale beige, the kind of neutrality that begged not to be blamed. Her face looked thinner, eyes sharper. Her mouth was pulled tight in a permanent wince, as if rehearsing for either victory or martyrdom. Luke sat between Bun, tired, tense, torn. "All rise," the bailiff called. The judge entered with slow steps and sharper eyes. He carried a single file, and the hearing began. Ruth moved with precision. She didn't waste time. No long speeches, no theatrics. She presented the binder titled Obstruction Evidence Timeline, followed by video footage of Sarah calmly engaging with Diane during supervised and unsupervised visits. Therapist reports diagnosing Emily with unresolved generational trauma, indicating reactive interference. Recovered messages suggesting intent to manipulate visitation outcomes. Screenshots of Emily's post-violation social media activity, defying the gag order. Each was marked, time-stamped, and placed before the bench with measured clarity. "She has never once missed a visitation," Ruth said. "She has never retaliated. Never provoked. She came with documentation, not drama." The judge nodded once. Then it was Emily's turn. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "We submit that there are significant cultural boundaries at play. Mrs. Mercer's parenting methods may feel intrusive, especially to a new mother establishing modern norms." The judge raised a brow. "Are you referring to Oregonian culture, or Instagram culture?" A few quiet chuckles drifted from the back of the room. Even Luke cracked the ghost of a smile quickly hidden. Emily tried to redirect. "This stress, it's affected my bond with Sarah, all the interference. The court visits, it's unnatural, but obstruction is?" the judge asked. Emily blinked. "I was protecting my child." "From what?" he asked gently. "A woman who fed her, held her, and read to her while you staged panic reels for your followers." Emily's jaw locked. Diane rose slowly when Ruth gave her a slight nod. She stepped to the front without paper, but with something firmer, her voice quiet and unwavering. "I've raised children for 35 years. In classrooms, in Sunday school, in my own home. I don't want control. I don't need credit. I just want to love my granddaughter without causing harm." She paused. Love should not be a battlefield, especially when a child stands in the middle. The courtroom was so still, even the bailiff looked up. Then she sat down. 10 minutes passed. The judge read through the final pages. The room held its breath. Finally he looked up. "Under Oregon Revised Statute 109.119, the court finds sufficient cause to award the petitioner, Mrs. Diane Mercer, permanent shared custody rights, structured at 2 full days and 1 overnight visit weekly. All current visitation schedules will convert to this order effective next Monday. He turned to Luke. Mr. Mercer, you will begin court-ordered co-parenting education. Your passivity contributed to this delay. It will not continue. Luke nodded, jaw tight with a strange mix of guilt and relief. Then the judge turned to Emily. You will abide by this order. Any further defiance will trigger sanctions, contempt proceedings, or custody redistribution. This court has no tolerance for emotional weaponry cloaked in motherhood. The gavel fell. It was over. Until it wasn't. Because as Emily stormed down the courthouse steps, heels clicking like gunfire, Diane waited just inside the doors, beside Ruth, who held a thick white envelope in one hand. Emily didn't even pause when it was handed to her. She ripped it open mid-step. Read the header. Stopped cold. Civil complaint. Defamation, malicious interference and reputation harm. Mercer vs. Caldwell Mercer. The street was quiet. A car passed, the engine loud against the silence that followed. Emily turned slowly, fury building behind her eyes, but Diane had already stepped past her, one hand on the railing, the other on peace. The first time Sarah called her Nana, it came out mid-laugh, sticky with apple juice and summer heat. Diane had just buckled her into the red wagon they used for park mornings, the one with scuffed whip and a faded floral cushion she'd sewn from leftover fabric. Sarah looked up, her curls wild from the breeze, and said it like it was a name she'd been saving for when it mattered. Nana. Diane froze, not with surprise, but with reverence, like she didn't want to breathe and risk breaking the moment. She smiled, brushing hair from Sarah's forehead. Yes, baby girl. I'm Nana. Every Saturday after that became ritual. Diane arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, same navy cardigan, same canvas bag, packed with snacks and books and a weather checker's awareness. Emily opened the door with the same forced smile, eyes sharp with unspoken objections, but court orders didn't care about eye rolls. Back by 6, Emily muttered. Diane didn't respond. She reached for Sarah, who practically leapt into her arms, tiny sneakers kicking against her hip. They spent mornings at Lithia Park, feeding ducks, watching shadows stretch across the pond. Sarah insisted on carrying the tiny yellow pail Diane had once used for Luke. It was chipped. It was perfect. By noon, they were back in Diane's kitchen. Sarah had a favorite cup, a plastic teal one, with a chipped handle and a sticker of a bunny half peeled off. She had a nap blanket that smelled like lavender and sunlight. She knew where the blocks were kept, which drawer held the markers, and which song meant it was almost time for story hour. It was not babysitting. It was home. One Saturday, Diane returned from the garden to find Luke already sitting in the backyard chair, feet stretched out, a glass of lemonade sweating beside him. Sarah sat nearby, stacking foam blocks and narrating in babble. He didn't look up immediately, just nodded toward his daughter. She sings to herself when she's comfortable. Diane knelt and handed Sarah a sliced peach. She knows she's safe, Diane said softly. Luke looked down, then up. I didn't realize how much I missed that feeling, until I saw it in her. They didn't talk about the court, or the letters, or the silence he'd allowed for too long. They didn't need to. He started coming more often after that, sometimes just for an hour, sometimes staying through dinner. He never brought Emily. And he never tried to explain. Diane never asked. She baked instead. Small pies, apple crumble, mini loaves with Sarah's handprint pressed gently into the crust, with cinnamon sugar. You're turning your kitchen into a peace treaty, Paige said one evening, stealing a warm scone off the counter. I don't need a treaty, Diane replied. I need the child to know love wins. Paige bit into the scone. You didn't just win, she said through a mouthful of crumbs. You rebuilt something. That's different. Sarah slept soundly in the guest room that night, curled under a quilt stitched from fabric Diane had saved for someday. A stuffed bear rested at her side. On the dresser sat her cup, rinsed and waiting for morning. Diane stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of Sarah's chest. She didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She just breathed. The next afternoon, a cream envelope arrived in her mailbox. No return address. Preschool letterhead. Inside, a short form, crisp and clear, emergency contact authorization. Please confirm legal guardianship tier for child pickup, in case of illness or early closure. Current contact, Emily Caldwell Mercer. Requested additional contact, Di Mercer. There was a handwritten sticky note attached. Sarah talks about Nana Saturdays every week. We'd like to make sure you're listed in case we ever need someone trusted. Diane stood at her kitchen counter, the form in her hand. She looked out the window toward the garden, where Sarah's red wagon sat drying in the sun. Diane opened the safe slowly, the dial clicking beneath her fingertips like a vault remembering secrets. She turned past the numbers with practiced calm. 37, 14, 6. Inside, tucked behind her husband's flag from the service and a copy of their mortgage deed, was the printed text. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, ink crisp and cruel in its simplicity. Emily, don't let her near the baby again. She's too much like your mom used to be. Luke. Diane placed it into a brass frame lined with linen matting, no plaque, no explanation, just the message that tried to erase her, preserved now not as evidence, but as artifact. She clicked the safe shut, turned the dial, and exhaled. That evening she sat at her desk with a fresh cup of chamomile and opened the sealed envelope from her attorney's office. The paperwork was thick, finalized will, notarized amendments. At the center, one clause was underlined in blue, a named trust, established in the name of Sarah Elaine Mercer, to be released in full upon completion of higher education, stable living environment, and proof of emotional support by listed guardian, not by wealth, not by birthright, by character. The future would not be dictated by manipulation again. Outside, late summer leaves fluttered across the porch. The garden light clicked on as dusk settled in. Across town, Emily's latest post had just gone live. A vague quote, layered over a soft focus photo of Sarah's silhouette. The price of silence is peace. But the comments told a different story. Weren't you the one lying in court? Hard to blame the grandma when she's the only one showing up. This account used to be about motherhood. Now it's about bitterness. Her follower count dropped by the hundreds, then thousands. The court records had leaked, not officially, but enough people knew someone who knew someone, and suddenly the truth wasn't a secret, it was common knowledge. Diane didn't check the fallout. She didn't need digital justice. She had Saturday mornings. That weekend, Sarah arrived in mismatched socks and a purple tutu, gripping her bunny cup, and a wrinkled drawing of Diane with gray hair and Nana, written in bold red crayon above it. Diane knelt to hug her, heart already melting, when Sarah leaned in close and whispered, "Can I stay for dinner this time?" Diane smiled. "Of course, sweetheart. You never have to ask." Dinner was grilled cheese and tomato soup with goldfish on the side. Sarah insisted on sitting in her chair, the one with the yellow booster pad and flowered placemat. As the sun dipped behind the pine trees, Diane pulled out the picture book, Owl Moon, the same one she used to read to Luke. She opened the cover slowly, smoothing the spine as Sarah curled beside her on the couch, her head resting in the hollow of Diane's shoulder like it had always belonged there. The room was quiet except for Diane's voice, soft, deliberate, steady. When you go owling, you don't need words or warmth or anything but hope. Sarah's fingers twisted into Diane's sleeve, eyes drooping with sleep. And that's when Diane looked down, really looked, and saw the child she had almost been denied. The tiny life they tried to turn into a battleground. A bargaining chip, a border wall, but not anymore. Now Sarah was just a little girl with soup on her chin, breath evening out beneath a blanket, safe in the arms of the woman who fought not for custody, but for connection. The woman they tried to lock out. The woman they never saw coming. Diane leaned down and kissed Sarah's hair. Then she turned off the lamp, tucked the blanket higher, and whispered into the quiet, "She sent a text to keep me away. I used it to walk right through her front door in court.